typically from Scott. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you I don't remember the exact.
Speak right into it. Yep.
All right. I don't remember the exact year that I attended my first conference with OCM, but it was around the year 2000, and the conference was in Nashville, Tennessee. And I had just went to work for Farmers Union as a field representative for Western Oklahoma. And I felt like, after hearing all the great speakers that were here that day, there in Nashville, and all the experts, that I was a little bit over my head. I felt like I was swimming and also it's interesting that 22 years later, I'm back here speaking to the group. But that was my first introduction to OCM. You guys did a great job. You had a great organization. And, competition is the American way. And without competition, the free markets just don't work. So, with that being said, we had a debate that day with two ag econ professors that you probably know very well. One was Darrell Wright, representing our point of view. And then they had Luther Wheaton, the Oklahoma State professor, representing the corporate ag, big factory farm point of view. And a very lively debate and very interesting. And so that was my first opportunity to be here at OCM. So I just want to move on here to the next slide. But what's working for us in Oklahoma, and I've heard a lot of people speak over the last couple of days here. And I agree with about 99% of what's being said. The problems we have in agriculture are huge, and in the consolidation. But our state is no different than yours. During the pandemic, we saw grocery store shelves empty. We saw consumers not being able to buy our beef. We also had problems waiting times up to 2 years to get animals processed. That was pretty much all over the country. We heard the same type of stories and everything. And so we faced a lot of the same problems that everybody else did. But what we talked a lot about the resiliency here during the meeting. But let's talk about, what does that really mean? Well, the elasticity means to be able to bounce back quickly and be able to stretch and move for both the consumers and the producers, and the toughness of our food system to be able to withstand these black swan events that continue to happen over and over and over again. And so if one good thing that's came out of COVID is the fact that the consumers of this country have woke up and they see the vulnerability of this food system that we are dealing with today in all the consolidation. And if we're going to win this battle, we have to have the consumers on our side, because otherwise there's not near enough of us to get it done. So that we can take this lemon and make lemonade out of it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've done in Oklahoma. So in our small towns, I'm going to just talk about my life experience a little bit. I grew up in the same town, and we farm and ranch in for about 5 generations now. In the 1970s, and we had very prosperous communities in our rural areas then. Our businesses, we had retail, we had farm dealerships, we had automobile dealerships. It was a thriving community. When I was in FFA, we had 50 kids in our class, and about 47 of them were farm kids that came from production agriculture. Fast forward, my son, when he was in FFA, he was the only student in that same school that comes from production agriculture. So we've just seen a devastating effect in our rural communities with this consolidation. It's not just on our farms. It is our entire community, and really in a rural community, rural state like Oklahoma, it's the entire state. So let's talk about what happened a little bit and where we were at in the 1970s. We all had that time we had diversified farms. We raised pigs, several hundred pigs on our farm. We raised cattle. Many different crops were raised on our farm, and it gave us lots of opportunities, not to make a lot of money, but to make a little bit of money on each one of those diversified operations that we had. And it allowed us to really use all of our resources to the best and get the very most out of them. I remember being young, and whenever we had a field of wheat that was poor quality and it was going to take a big discount at the elevator, grain elevator, my dad would bin all that. Then we would grind feed, and we fed hogs all winter with it. And we walked that profit off with selling those hogs. And I remember many times we would be out working in the field, plowing and working on summer log, and then we'd come in and eat supper. And then Dad and I'd go out, and we would load up a trailer load, a gooseneck load of fat hogs, and drive them to a rodeo meat plant about 30 miles away that bought hogs from independent producers 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And if we didn't like that price, we could haul them 100 miles to the Oklahoma City stockyards, and they auctioned off hogs 2 or 3 days a week there. And we had several processors right across the street. I mean, literally across the street. They would shut gates and walk the pigs over to the processors. And we got good prices. And we made, that's what kept our family going, and being able to take the off-grade grains and things like that, and use our labor and turn them into some extra income that we could pay the mortgage on. But that's all gone away now. And so we don't have those different revenue sources anymore. And we don't have that, we've lost so many farmers and ranchers that we don't have that commerce in those rural communities anymore. And so, we talked about the circular economy. And President Biden has spoke about this, and Andy has as well. But you take a look at the ranch. You start at the rancher level, and we all have to have inputs in order to run our farms and our ranches, whatever those inputs that are needed. So we buy those, and we try to buy those within our same geographical area. Then we have the processors in town. And so we are able to raise that beef, buy our inputs local, have it processed local. And so we provide jobs in our community that would not be there if we were just selling our cattle to the big four. Then the next part about it is, then we can sell to independent restaurants and independent grocers like David Smith's people that we talked about this morning. And so that provides more jobs locally once again. And then at the bottom end of the circle is the consumers. And so we give consumers more choices, more options, more price points. They know where their food is coming from, which we heard earlier that consumers definitely want to know. And then that retail food dollar, much more of it stays there locally in that community or in the state of Oklahoma. So I've never been able to figure out a way to compete against the big four head to head. And I think a lot of people have tried and they've all had trouble competing against them head to head. So we've tried to devise a system that we could go out around and just bypass them altogether. So from the 1980s, when the farm crisis hit, is really when all the deregulation started. All this consolidation was allowed to take place all over the country. And so now we're 40 some years into that, and we see the effects of it. A little at a time, a little at a time. We've lost our independent hog producers. And I'll just tell you, in my state of Oklahoma, there is not one, repeat, not one independent hog producer left, commercial hog producer left in the state of Oklahoma. They're all either corporate hogs, or we have a handful of folks that raise show pigs for the 4-H and the FFA. But there's not one commercial operation still left in our state. When I grew up, every farmer had a few pigs, or they had a few sheep, and they had cow to help supplement their operation. That's just how much it's changed with the consolidation. You guys have heard this many times before. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. But when we look at the consolidation, you know, if you want to buy corn seed, you only have 4 companies that control 85% of all the corn seed in this nation. If you want to buy a tractor, or if you want to have your tractor even worked on, there's only 3 companies left to do that. 95% of all the tractor work and production you can buy comes from 3 companies. In the beef packing world, it's 4 companies control about 85% of all of our nation's beef supply. So when we take a look at our small town Oklahoma, you know, we have changed, and the industry's become specialized in one crop, or only having one line of livestock. And if you're still in the hog business in Oklahoma, you now work for the corporate factors. That's who you work for. Same in the chicken industry as well. Our beef guys have been fighting like crazy to keep our independence, and we will continue. Over the last 40 or 50 years, we have seen a tremendous change in our rural communities. And, you know, we have some communities like this one on the picture that have prospered and done okay. Those communities aren't reliant upon agriculture as their driver, as their economic driver. The communities which the vast majority of our rural communities are reliant upon agriculture as our driver. Let's take a look and see what's happened to them. So this is what a typical small town in Oklahoma looks like now. And the other side of the street looks just like this. And maybe there's one business left, maybe there's a barber shop left, or maybe there's a branch bank. There might be a C-store. That's about it. Everything else is gone. We have school buildings that are empty. There's no children to go to school anymore there. We have churches that sit empty because there's no families there anymore. So this was before COVID hit. We had these problems. Once COVID hit, one of the things that we saw was the breakdown and the failure of the food system in the United States. It became evident to all Americans all across the country that what is going on? Why can't I go to the grocery store and find what I've always been able to find? And guys, that was really a blessing to us in order to be able to shine the light on this broken, consolidated food system. Our food system in Oklahoma failed just like everywhere else. But one thing that came out of this was when the federal government put out the first round of CARES money, the states were able to decide where that money would go in order to help. And so our leaders decided that they would allocate $10 million of the first round of federal CARES money to very small processors. And so when we first heard about the Department of Ag in Oklahoma that was going to decide who got this money, the first names that were talked about were the Big Four and how they could get a piece of that money. And I called the Oklahoma Secretary of Ag and I said, Secretary Arthur, I said, I really like you a lot. I respect you and I love working with you. But I need to warn you that if you give $1 of this CARES money to the Big Four, I'm going to call a press conference and we're going to be on TV and I'm going to call you out on it because we need that money in these little, very small plants in rural Oklahoma. That's where it's needed. And she heard us, the governor heard us. They put together a task force throughout the state from all of the different ag groups, had representatives on there. And they went through the applications and decided who would get what money. So out of the $10 million, we were able to fund 40 different projects in the state. So I believe like 22 were brand new facilities that we got open. And the other projects were either upgrades, where we took an old plant and we upgraded it to double the capacity, triple the capacity, increase storage space for cooler space, shackle space, be able to get these plants USDA compliant and brought in federal inspectors, state inspectors, where they were before maybe just an exempt plant that just did custom slaughtering. So when that project first started, the naysayers and some of the other organizations said, oh, well, you know, you might get 2 or 3 people takers on this deal, but you know, that nobody's going to do that. There's no way these little plants compete. They're not making any money, yada, yada, yada. They had 9,000 reasons why it wouldn't work. One was, oh, we don't have any rendering plants. We heard we don't have any water. We even heard we didn't have any roads, didn't we, Lacey? They told us, hey, you don't have to get enough roads. You can't do that. It was all BS. And so when they put the applications out, they never thought that they would ever spend the $10 million. We got 196 applicants apply for this money. All of these were very small processors, whether they wanted to either open a new one or revitalize an old one, or even open one that had been closed before and remodel it and get it up to today's standards. They couldn't believe it. The state government did not believe that there was such an interest in this and blew them away. I will tell you, there is still an interest and it is still growing. And at $10 million in the scheme of money in DC is like a penny to you and I. It's not very much money, but look what good it did. I'm going to show you how it was distributed around the state. But that small amount of money made a tremendous difference. And we all see government programs many times that don't work. And we all think, well, you know, that was just money thrown away. But this worked well. And so what did it do? Well, it gives our consumers more choices if we have local processing. It also creates more price points for the consumer. They don't have to travel. In my state's very rural. You may have to travel for 50 or 100 miles to go to a grocery store that has any kind of real service. Then we know the consumer wants to know how their animals are raised and where they come from. And if they can buy local, they will. Just give them the opportunity and they will buy local. Your restaurants will buy local. Your independent grocery, like David Smith's organization, they'll buy local. Because they're fighting the same fight we are, guys. They're just trying to stay independent, with the big corporations trying to push them down, just like we are. Farmers, more marketing opportunities. You want to sell your cattle to the big four? Fine, go ahead, sell them to the big four. But this gives you another avenue to be able to market your cattle and be able to keep more of that food dollar locally in our state and make our little communities prosper. Production schedules. David talked a lot about that a little bit, and the bigger operations just have a tremendous time in scheduling, tens of thousands of head of cattle be ready on a certain day or whatever. Well, if I'm a farmer or a rancher there in Oklahoma, I can scatter out my breeding times and I can put cattle in my own feed yard. Now it's tiny, guys. It's a little feed yard, but and we feed the grain we raise, and we feed the alfalfa hay that we raise there on it. But I can string it out to where I have a few head of steers ready every month to go into the retail market. We can work around the big four packers. That's what we've done. I've not ever been able to figure out how to beat them. And without the federal government coming in here with some of this legislation, some of these rules that we talked about with the Packers and Stockyards Act, until we can enforce our antitrust laws and things, we can't go head to head with them. But we can go around it. And then it creates additional revenue sources. So if you remember I believe I read this week, if Steve Stratford's in here, he could probably back me up on this, but this week, the Packers margins are around $250 a head. That's their profit margin. There was many times in the pandemic, they were over $1,000 a head in the deal. Now you want to talk about being able to compete. I can compete all day with those kind of margins in there. And keep that money local instead of sending that money into corporate coffers. And many of these corporate coffers, remember, are not even in this country. They're overseas. And so anything we can do to keep the money local is a benefit. Okay, let's talk about direct sales. So we put together a little nonprofit organization there in Oklahoma. Got 52 ranches participating in it now. They're all using little small, very small, independent processors in pretty much in rural communities. I think maybe there's one in a larger town, but pretty much all over the state in rural communities. So everybody does it a little bit different, and that's okay. We have one of the members of our marketing group. He does about 50 steers a week. He built his own processing plant. We'll get into that in a minute. We have other folks that are like myself, and I try to market about 5 steers a month. And we sell it directly to the restaurants, consumers, and that sort of thing. I still sell some cattle on the open market, take them to the stockyards to sell, but I want to try to sell as much of my own beef, sell it that way to individually to cut out all the middlemen as I possibly can. So it could be as simple as my wife has an insurance agency in our little town of 3,500 people there. And so we put in 6 freezers in that insurance office there, and then just started advertising that we had retail ready cuts, USDA inspected, retail ready, high end Angus beef in there. And so we start selling it right there in our own community. Next thing you know, a couple of the restaurants want to buy from us as well. And then we had calls from Oklahoma City, which is 100 miles from my ranch. The restaurants wanting to buy directly from us. And that's how we're doing it. Now, I'm not the most successful one at this. I've got some other members that only sell a couple of beefs a month. You know, so it's a vast difference in our sizes, but what I'm trying to tell you is a lot of different sizes will work. We have both grain-fed operations, traditional grain-fed operations in these programs, and we have grass-fed operations in these programs as well. And we have different breeds of cattle also in the market programs. So all of them can fit in there. So let me show you about what we have in our state now in processing plants. So each one of these dots represents one of these very small processors in our state. And I think all but a couple of these are now open or up and running. We still have several more that are under construction right now. And most of the Oklahoma tribes also have been adding additional capacity to process both bison and cattle as well. But you can see how well distributed all over the state that these little processors are at. And right down here in the corner, this corner dot, that's Altus, Oklahoma. And if there is a hell, that's probably where it is. It's about 112 there, seems like all the time there. But so we have those guys, and then out in our panhandle, the little tiny town of Felt, Oklahoma. It is so little, they don't even have a post office anymore out there. Nothing lives out there but rattlesnakes and tumbleweeds, pretty much. And a few really, really tough ranchers that raise cattle out there. But we've got a processing plant out there, a small one, and it's doing very well. And that CARES money, that $10 million made a lot of this possible. And some
Cap. Do you have that cow cap?
yeah, we do.
Take care of that.
Yes, we do. We sure do. So what do these little small plants do for us that the big four don't do? Well, we get to keep that money locally. We get to keep the money in our local communities. These little plants don't rob us blind and then send all of our money overseas. It's a huge advantage to having these very small local owned plants. Another thing that goes along with this is, again, the resiliency thing. If one of these plants go down, it's not a big deal because we have 100 plants now in Oklahoma, 100 of these very small plants in Oklahoma. In the beef, some of them do pork, not very many, mostly beef. We don't have any of the big four packers in the beef business in our state. They're in the chicken business and they're in the pork business there, but we don't have them in beef. And so we've really been able to excel program. Typical small town Oklahoma. This is actually in Council Hills, Oklahoma. It's in the eastern part of the state. Population 150 people. Okay. This is all that's left of their downtown. All the rest of their downtown has been tore down. It's gone. It's just an empty lot now. This was the last building standing in their downtown. Across the street, there is I believe it's the smallest postal office in the United States, and they advertise that. And there's a little old gas station there, a C-store that is pretty pitiful to look at as well. And that's it. That's their business in the whole community. But let me show you what happens. This is the Watkins family. They are family ranchers right there in Council Hill. They've been there for generations. They bought that old building and turned that into a very small meat processor. He's processing 50 steers a week right here. And not only are they his steers that they're raising on their ranch, but he's also has 4 other ranches right there in that area that are also selling their steers into this market. He put a retail store in the front of this processing deal. And he doesn't sell the box beef off the trucks. They sell everything that they comes off that cow right there local. Just this family. So he's created about 15 jobs in this town of 150 people, has a nice looking business there. And he's doing very well. He's doing so well, in fact, he's expanded out now and opened 2 more retail locations in different communities. So he moved a few miles down the road to another community. I think it's probably around 4,000 or 5,000 people. And he put a retail store in and a deli for a lunch counter in there. That one went so well, he moved another 40, 50 miles down the road to a much bigger community, about 20,000, and he put another retail store in there. And so this is what the CARES money did for us in Oklahoma. This is just one example of it. This went on all over the state. Now, this man's been very successful with it. There's been a couple, maybe even more successful in our state, and many that haven't gone to this extreme yet. But I'm just telling you, these things can work, and they do work. So once again, the Little Council Hill, Oklahoma, the family ranchers that built this thing and got it going. There's 4 ranches now there. They're buying their inputs there in that county. We're processing in that county. So there's 15 new jobs just there at that one processing plant. And then they've added about 20 more jobs in each of those retail locations that they have. So this one deal created about 50 new jobs. And in Kansas City, 50 jobs is nothing, right? But out in one of these rural communities, one of these rural counties, that's huge. That is a big deal. And the 2 retail outlets. So once again, a resiliency, we spread our risk. We spread the possibility of any kind of outbreak, whether it be COVID or a fire, trucking problems, you name it. We see these black swan events happening over and over. In Oklahoma, our localized meat processing is not only, it is actually thriving and growing. And nobody thought this would work. Nobody thought this would happen, but the consumer is why it works, guys. The consumer really wants to know in the food concern. They really want to know how it's raised. And once they get some of our homegrown beef, it's better. They like it and they want some more of it, right? And so, I know this isn't going to ever replace the big 4 or anything like that. And I know this is a tiny, tiny deal in the overall schemes of things. But there is ways to fight back and keep our family farms and ranches independent. And I tell people, critics tell me all the time, oh, well, that isn't going to make a difference in the industry. Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does eventually if other states adopt similar programs and implement them. Maybe we do make a difference on a national level. But even if we don't, if I can keep one family ranch in business and independent on their land, the whole deal works. That's the way I look at it. And if I keep 100 ranches on their farms and on their places, hey, that's pretty good. So anyway, at this time, I'll take any questions you have. I'm an open book. I'll tell you whatever, if you like it or not. I'm not afraid of speaking up and tell you what I think. So open for any questions.
How do you guys base your meat price? What you're selling, your steers to the retail side? How do you work that?
Yeah, so every one of our members does it a little differently, I will tell you. I have a kind of an unusual way I do it. I actually back into mine. So I know what it takes for me to be profitable on my operation, and I know what price I need to be able to sustain it and all. So I plugged that price in, and I'll just tell you, it's $2 a pound on the hoof, and then I back into it, and then so my yield and my cuts, we change our cuts around a little bit for seasonal, where we can sell more steaks, we make more money, so we try to cut out different lower cut steaks that are a little cheaper to the consumer. Your high end steaks are easy to sell. They're not hard to sell at all. Your ground product, you got a lot of it, so you need school systems to be able to sell into. You need these the restaurants that do a lot of burgers and things like that to be able to sell into. But we leave our pricing up to each one of our members, prices it differently. And then, it's a challenge. And like David talked about, when you're using this many different processors around, and I believe our membership uses about 40 of these 100 processors in the state. You get 40 different people, even if they have the same vacuum pack systems and it's all retail ready and everything, you're still going to cut it a little different, right? And so that consistency that David talked about, it's harder to do this way. It is. It's much easier if you have one centralized plant to do it all in. But that defeated the purpose here, our goal. And our goal was to keep as many of the retail food dollars in these local communities as possible. And I've grown up as a commodity farmer all my life. My dad, my grandpa, and on, and I, went to school and was trained to think that way and everything. It's really, really hard for me, and I'm sure it's hard for a lot of you to think a little bit differently and think about, well, let's don't grow commodities anymore. Let's don't sell commodities anymore. Let's sell a finished product. Let's sell our beef. Let's sell what we do. Let's sell my granddaughters on the package of the beef on their ponies out there on the ranch, and that you're buying this family's products here. You're supporting this ranch's families on our land. We've got the story that David talked about. It's very valuable, and we can tell it. I don't know that maybe somebody's smart enough to figure out how we compete on a commodity level. I haven't been able to. So this is what we've set up and we're doing. Be glad to help anybody else that wants to try this in your state or your area. We'll be glad to share what we've learned and what we can do. Yeah.
We've got a similar problem with Nebraska. We find out that smaller communities like environmental quality for a packing plant in a small community is very inhibited. And further ahead, we brought the country somewhere. Did you run into that same problem there?
No, not really. Now, one of the problems that some of the rural communities have is the wastewater and being able to treat it and get rid of the wastewater. Some communities just don't have the capacity to treat that wastewater and get rid of it. So in those communities, they really don't want you there. But there's a lot of places that do have the capability of handling the wastewater. As far as the odor and smell and all that, we're a rural state, and we have not run into those problems. But we're not in the metropolitan areas either. We're very, very rural. Yes.
You said that Washington hired 15 people, right?
Yes.
The teacher hired 15.
Yes.
And do you have any problems with labor?
Oh, absolutely. So labor is a problem for us, just like it is for everybody else in every industry, I think, in the whole country right now. So this is a kind of a lost art, the art of cutting and processing. It used to be when I grew up, every grocery store had their own meat cutter, right, in there, and that's all gone away with the box beef and the big four sending the products in that are already pre-cut. So it has been a problem. So one of the things we've done is we put a meat cutting schools in our FFA programs in our state. We also put them in our career techs, our VOTEC systems in our states, and our junior colleges. We're blessed to have a lot of rural junior colleges, 2-year schools. And some of this CARES money actually went to one of those junior colleges in southeast Oklahoma. And they have built a packing house right there on campus. And so they process both pork and beef there. And they can come away with a 2-year degree, associate's degree from that college. So they're also trying to teach them management skills as well. Not just the meat processing stuff, but also safety, food safety, management and all that is being taught in there. It's making a difference. We have one tribe, it's the Blubaugh Nation in northeast Oklahoma, who Dave Carter, I think he helped build that thing actually, or was a consultant on that. The Indian tribes out there built. It is the most state-of-the-art processing plant I've ever been in my life. It looks like a hospital when you go in there. It is that clean. And they also do added value cooked items there. So they're making beef sticks and beef jerky and salamis and summer sausages and all that, as well as doing the processing. But they're also training people there. So they set this up as a school as well. So they're processing their own cattle for the tribe owns, their own bison that they own, and then other tribes throughout the country are shipping bison in there to be processed. And there's even a tribe out of New Mexico that has farm raised elk, and they're shipping that farm raised elk in there even to be processed and turned into an added value product there. But they're teaching their people all the skills necessary to go out and manage one of these plants, because a lot of the tribal governments we have, I'm not sure, 35 to 40 some different tribal governments in Oklahoma. And many of them are building or have our processing plants. And so there is a tremendous need and for not only meat cutters and everything, but somebody run those plants, management. And so we have the same problem as everybody else, but this is how we're trying to tackle it, and a little bit at a time. Yes.
Just to mention, one of the things that's out there right now is that USDA NEPA has a grant program available for technical schools, community colleges particularly, to develop those kind of programs. And they can get up to $650,000 per school to develop curriculum, put in equipment. And that program's available through the application is through September 22nd.
And that's USDA program,
That's a
right?
USDA.
USDA grant program there as well. So I'd encourage you to use that in your states as well to try to train workers and and it's good, and inspectors, even training a meat inspector. I think a state inspector in Oklahoma salary is about $65,000 a year. That's pretty good for some of our rural communities. And you just come out of you come out right out of high school and make $65,000 a year and being a meat inspector. So this thing has grown so much, guys, and just since COVID in the last 3 years, that we're having to add more inspectors each and every year. So our state government is having to fund and pay for more inspectors. So we added 5 new inspectors to our state program last year. And then this year, we added another 5, and we're already filled up. And so during our next session, the legislative session, we're going to go back and get some more money for some more inspectors. But they're just trying to keep up with the growth that's going on.
What about
USDA inspectors, they're having a difficult time getting enough USDA inspectors in too. Many of these little plants, they'll have they'll run one day, maybe they run state inspectors. Next day, they've got USDA inspectors in there. Maybe the next day, they're running custom exam in that same facility there. But the USDA inspectors, I know that they have more money. I know the Biden administration has allocated more money to pay for some of the overtime as well. But I know they're still short on USDA inspectors. It's still a problem. Good. Thank you.